David hated the night shift. He'd taken the job as Ridgeway High's security guard after his construction business folded, and it wasn't glamorous work. His nights consisted of pacing dark hallways, staring at flickering security monitors, and occasionally chasing off teenagers who thought sneaking into the school after hours was a good idea. The school was a maze after dark. Shadows stretched long and deep, swallowing corners, and the hum of the fluorescent lights felt almost alive. But David was used to that. What he wasn't used to were the doors. It started 2 weeks into the job. While patrolling the East Wing, David noticed a door at the end of the hallway. It was unmarked and seemed out of place, its faded green paint standing out against the beige walls. He frowned. He'd walked this hallway a dozen times and never noticed it before. When he tried the handle, it didn't budge. Odd, but not worth worrying about. He filed it away in his mind and moved on. But the door didn't go away. Every night it was there, always at the end of the East Wing, always locked. When he mentioned it to Mr. Caldwell, the head custodian, the man just stared at him. "There's no door in the East Wing," Caldwell said firmly, his face pale. David didn't press further, but his curiosity grew. The next night he returned with a flashlight, determined to investigate. The door seemed older up close, the wood warped and chipped. A chill crept up his spine as he examined it, his flashlight flickering. Then, faintly, he heard it. A knock. David froze. The knock came again, louder this time. He pressed his ear to the door, holding his breath. On the other side, a voice whispered his name. David. His blood ran cold. He stumbled back, nearly dropping his flashlight, and fled down the hall. The door began to haunt him. Every night it felt closer, as though the hallway was growing shorter, pushing him toward it. The whispers followed him, faint at first, then louder. They weren't just from the door anymore. They came from the walls, the vents, the ceiling. David, help us. By the third week, David was losing sleep. He pored over the building's blueprints, searching for any record of the door. There was none. The East Wing should have ended in a blank wall. Frustrated, he turned to the school's history, digging through dusty archives in the principal's office. That's when he found it. Ridgeway High had been built over the ruins of St. Alora's orphanage, which had burned down in the early 1900s. 23 children had died in the fire, along with the headmaster. David found an old photo of the orphanage staff, and his stomach dropped. In the back row stood a man who looked eerily familiar, his features a perfect match to the janitor, Mark, who'd vanished weeks earlier. The next night, David decided to confront the door. Armed with a crowbar, he made his way to the East Wing. The door stood waiting, its green paint seeming darker, almost black in the dim light. The whispers were louder now, a chorus of voices pleading and wailing. He pried the door open. It didn't lead to a storage closet or another room. It led to a staircase spiraling downward into pitch-black darkness. The air reeked of decay and burnt wood. Against his better judgment, David descended, the sound echoing endlessly. When he reached the bottom, his flashlight flickered again, revealing a vast underground chamber. The walls were scorched, and the floor was littered with broken toys and children's shoes. At the center of the room was a circle of desks, each one marked with a name carved deep into the wood. He recognized one immediately, Clara. The desk looked charred, but the carving was fresh. The whispers grew deafening, and David turned, his flashlight sweeping across the room. Shadows darted out of its beam, but he caught glimpses of them. Small, hunched figures with hollow eyes and charred skin. "Help us!" one of them rasped, its voice barely human. David's instinct was to run, but something in their eyes stopped him. They weren't attacking. They were begging. Before he could speak, a new sound filled the room, the creak of the staircase. David whipped around to see the door slamming shut above him. The whispers turned to screams, and the figures began to swarm. He swung his flashlight wildly, but it was no use. The last thing he saw before the light went out was the face of a child, its grin impossibly wide. David didn't show up for work the next day. His patrol log was found on the desk in the security office. The final entry reading, "Doors open." The principal dismissed his disappearance as another fluke, a casualty of poor hiring choices. That night, the East Wing was sealed off without explanation, and the rumors began again. Students claim you can still hear David's footsteps echoing in the halls at night. Others say, if you find the green door and knock 3 times, you hear him knocking. Still trapped, still searching for a way out.